In Washington, D.C. on January 20th, President-elect Donald Trump is to become the 45th President of the United States. At the time of this taping, the President-elect hasn't announced his nomination to lead the Department of Agriculture, but he has indicated where he'll go on certain issues such as trade, which we've discussed previously on Market Journal. Wednesday morning, we talked with Nebraska Extension Policy Specialist Brad Lubben to learn how the new administration could impact agriculture.
Well, actually, right now, the outlook for ag is still quite fuzzy. We don't have a Secretary of Ag designate yet. Maybe we'll have one before Christmas, but right now we don't have one, and with the current revolving door of candidates, it's even becoming less certain who the likely next Secretary will be.
What do you think the big issues are for agriculture now? Certainly we heard some during the campaign, but what do you think they realistically are?
Well, and even beyond just the next Secretary, it's the issues that are on the horizon next year. The 2018 Farm Bill is upon us. It will be time to start that debate. You know that the committees in Congress will initiate that debate. The new Secretary should have a say. But there are big issues about budget and spending priorities and even some program reforms in the 2018 Farm Bill. But then there is this whole host of other issues: trade, regulations, taxes, immigration, healthcare. A big plate of issues, some of which won't be debated necessarily within ag circles, but certainly that have impacts on our ag communities.
We've talked a lot about trade on this show before. Tell me about the regulations that you think were pointed to for potential rollbacks.
Right. Well, if I first sort of make the comparison, we talk about trade and the concerns that ag has about both candidates had backed away from trade, and the President-elect has talked about pulling out of agreements. That's certainly a concern on the demand side of the equation for ag. Yet the optimism on the regulatory side is that rolling back regulations can help us on the cost side, so some offset if both of those would come to pass. On the regulatory side, the big elephant in the room, so to speak, is WOTUS, the Waters of the United States rule. And the promises that a new administration, new Congress would roll back that proposed WOTUS rule, with the caveat that you can't just withdraw it and have nothing. You still have this sort of confused Supreme Court set of rulings about what is and what isn't covered, and thus the reason for a rule to define exactly which waters are covered and which aren't. Obviously, the new administration may not go as far as what the previous administration proposed, but something likely still has to be done in that area. Look at air quality regulations, look at biotechnology regulation, on food labeling, on down the list. There's a lot of regulatory area there for potential relief.
Short-term or long-term, do you think it's realistic that immigration is addressed and health care as well?
Those are two issues, where ag won't necessarily dominate the conversation, but the impacts on ag are tremendous. It's impossible to imagine an agricultural sector, both in the production and processing side, without an immigrant workforce. So some workable reform has to be achieved. Can that be a combination of border security and legal immigration? It remains to be seen whether the new administration, the new Congress, can actually get a workable package together. Healthcare in much the same boat. With all the push against the current federal healthcare legislation and rules, yet there's a need for something. It's not just repeal and eliminate. It would have to be repeal and replace. And if that's the case, the challenge is on figuring out how to replace it.
Who more dictates ag policy in Washington? Is it the President and the White House, or is it the Congress?
Well, fundamentally, we can say that the Secretary always tries to have a voice, and some are better than others and have been more successful than others in contributing to the discussion. But it's a voice, and it's one of many voices that are heard in the halls of Congress and in the committee rooms. So look to Congress for leadership in terms of actually developing what the next bill looks like. Look to the administration for some guidance and preference on what they hope it looks like.